Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube. Today we're trying something a little bit different here. Not only am I going to give it a go with this whole live streaming thing, you will see if I don't know if anybody's into that or cares to peek into part of the process. But as I shifted some of the format here today, I figured we would just go all out and try everything new. Rather than just doing an individual review today, there's at least three, almost four movies I kind of want to catch up on, each briefly just to kind of keep you in the know what's in theaters, what's doing well at home, what the global box office looks like after Inside Out 2 just completely decimated everything. So, get a little bit of movie news in there for you as well and kind of touch on maybe what's coming out this weekend. There's just so much stuff now. We're about to be fully entrenched in movie season. So I, for one, have been looking forward to this. It's going to be a lot of late nights, early mornings, whenever I could get to the theater. But let's just dive in. We're going to talk Bad Boys Ride or Die first. Now, obviously, the Bad Boys themselves, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, said, yeah, we probably should have called Bad Boys 3 Ride or Die, and then Bad Boys for Life should have been the fourth one. Maybe they didn't think they'd get the green light for the sequel. But directors Adil Alarbi and Bilal Fallah, who did Bad Boys 3, are back with Bad Boys 4. In between this, they shot a Batgirl movie for DC and Warner Brothers, which was shelved and written off for tax purposes, just kind of like the Looney Tunes, the Acme movie that they were going to be kind of doing. They wrote the film off, and Peter Safran, who is the co-studio or co-head of DC Studios, said, the movie was unreleasable. It'll do irreparable damage to DC's image, to these characters, as they're pushing for this new DC universe from James Gunn. They've been shutting down production on TV shows. Superman and Lois is over because they don't want any Superman competition. They're rewriting Peacemaker. They're totally shifting who stays, who goes, but having Michael Keaton Batman, Academy Award winner Brendan Fraser, and the action behind this, and not to mention having a black Batgirl. I mean, there were so many things that were fascinating about this movie, and they just scrapped it. Probably not for tax purposes, probably not an unreleasable movie. And after watching Bad Boys 3 and now watching Bad Boys 4, I'm calling BS. They're completely full of crap. Uh, there's no way these guys made a bad Batgirl movie. Because Bad Boys 4, especially, I mean, I had such a kick-ass time with this movie. Will Smith, a lot of people online have kind of been talking about the slap, talking about the Oscars. Saw a great tweet someone said, and it was like, well, I think everybody kind of stopped caring about that almost immediately after it happened. Everybody made an uproar in social media, but I don't think anybody can deny the star power of Will Smith, much like a Tom Cruise, who consistently, summer after summer after summer, dropped entertaining films, sci-fi, action. Will Smith, obviously great with the comedy as well. It's just so good to see him in his element, to see him comfortable. He kind of got jerked around a little bit with some of the Suicide Squad stuff after that, once they went another direction with some of those things. So I, for one, I mean, I love him. I grew up watching Independence Day. It felt like every other month. So many quotable lines from him. Martin Lawrence, I do enjoy, and I think they work great together. He's probably one of the two that, maybe his comedic instincts sometimes don't always lead him the right way. The film starts out a little more comedic than maybe I was expecting, but fortunately breaks off into a little more action as it goes. They kind of bring back Alexander Ludwig, Vanessa Hudgens to their kind of new little unit. It almost feels like a mini Fast and Furious style deal, especially with the ride or die in the log line. But Will Smith's going to settle down. He's going to get married. Everything's going to be changing, and of course, someone's going to threaten Miami. Someone's going to come threaten their families, and you're going to get some incredible drone aerial footage during some of this. I mean, a clip that's gone around on social media a lot is Will Smith wearing one of the camera rigs while he's kind of doing an action shot. And so he's got a gun with this mounted camera rig. So you're looking at his face as he's moving, and then he flips the entire system. And now you're staring down the barrel of the gun, almost in this kind of Call of Duty first person type look. They do so many intuitive and kind of ingenious camera techniques in the film. A lot like Michael Bay, I would say, is known for going back and watching, especially Bad Boys 2. And then you go and watch Ambulance. The man is a master of the craft. And I think that Dila Bilal, you know, honor that kind of work while putting their own kind of spin on it. It's funny. The action is just incredible. I was bummed because I saw it in a theater that, for whatever reason, didn't have the greatest sound system, because I knew Pitbull, all the other Miami club scene music should have been pumping a little bit louder. So I'm looking forward to watching it again at home. But I feel like if you need action, if you need comedy, you can't go wrong with the Bad Boys. They just consistently deliver. The movies are always fun. They're a little less gratuitous than maybe the Bay versions as well. So if that was something maybe that kept you at bay, there's nothing so obscene that you can't go in. I thought the audience had a great time. It was fun watching it with the full theater. The laughter, some of the shocks, some of like the oh my god, it was great. Those guys are so funny. I just love seeing them. The movie's making a lot of money too. They're almost in the top 10 worldwide box office, I'm pretty sure. I'm looking here. They're number 6. They made almost 300 million worldwide. I'm thinking they'll probably greenlight another one of these movies, and I don't mind it. I could watch these guys work all day. And I think that the directors especially deserve their kudos. It's super shitty what happened to them with the Batgirl movie. And so I think this hopefully will give them some peace of mind knowing, hey, you know what? We know what we got. We know we're talented. We know we're bringing something different. And if they can't recognize that, or if they want to use us as a scapegoat, well, screw you, Warner Brothers. You guys already know how I feel about Warner Brothers, though. But let's move into the movie monster, though, of this spring into summer, Inside Out 2, which has solved a lot of Pixar and Disney's woes of the last few years. They've been kind of struggling in their model. Whether we release something straight to streaming on Disney Plus, do we go a show route with some of our beloved Pixar classics? Do we dive back into doing sequels again like Monsters University, Cars 2 and 3, etc.? And they've kind of been playing around with them. They brought Luca and a couple other films back into theaters that kind of got shafted around the time of COVID. Um, I don't think anybody was prepared for the just absurd numbers that Inside Out's doing. After 2 weeks, it's already grossed $800 million worldwide. 2 weeks. And I'm like, that's just absurd. And this is, it's a family movie, so I think already you have built in parents could take their kids. You've got people who are probably my age 10 years ago when you were late high school, early college, whatever, you went and saw the first Inside Out. And so, of course, you're kind of curious to go back, see what they've done. It was one of those rare Pixar films that was like, whoa, this is really something magic, I think they did with that one. How they were able to conceptualize so many emotions, so many things that people feel, how all of that works together in harmony, how important it is to have all of those different emotions rather than just relying on one of them. And what worked so well for that movie, I think, is just what has piqued so much interest from people going into a sequel. I knew going in that there were going to be a few cast changes. They don't have. I don't know. It was interesting. Like looking through the cast list, Iowa Debris has joined this time around, and Tony Hale has joined as well. Tony Hale taking over for Bill Hader's Fear, and Iowa Debris taking over as Envy. Or sorry, not Envy. You've got Liza Lapira taking over as discussed for Mindy Kaling. I don't know if that was budget disputes, contract negotiations, because you still have Amy Poehler, who oddly enough I thought kind of like she sounded like Amy Poehler, but maybe I don't know. When I watched it, I was like, oh, the character of Joy in general maybe was just a little off for me this time around. Not that that really obstructed my viewing, I should say. But Inside Out 2 takes place as we're watching young Riley now moving into her teenage years. She's about to start high school. She's on a hockey team with a couple of her good friends. This is a time where You're losing some of that childhood. You're about to step into this next phase of life. You're going to be worrying about so many things. And then the biggest thing of all comes along, puberty. And puberty just freaking sucks. And if you are ever in middle school, you know just how awful it is and how awful you might feel about yourself when you don't understand yourself. And much like in the first film, there's an introduction of all these new emotions, whether it's envy, whether it is ennui, which is described as kind of, the boredom, almost very uninterested, I'll be on my phone. Uh, you've also got shyness, or, he's not, I don't think he's shyness, but, you bring in embarrassment, all these other thoughts that when you were going through these motions in middle school, when you were struggling to fit in, when you are torn between, friends that you've had forever and the potential of making new friends, especially when the future is uncertain. When you're 13, 14, 15, you're just hoping to make it through the next day. You're so worried about so many things ahead of you that it is hard to be present in the moment, and you almost make more problems for yourself. Anxiety is one of the huge new emotions in this movie as well, which of the last 10 years, I think the conversation around mental health has certainly bloomed. I think Inside Out, it's interesting to look at the first one and now look at this one and how we're discussing so many things. Maybe the casualness around anxiety, or just discussing things that everybody feels a little more openly. And I think is a great thing, truly, because I think we just need a lot more of that. I think movies like these are great, whether it's to help dumb things down for people or to help younger kids understand themselves a little bit better. So maybe they're not questioning, oh, what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling so anxious? Why do I feel like I don't have friends when I've got people all around me? There's all these silly questions that we ask ourselves. And we kind of know the answers, but we just work our brains to death almost, it feels like, just hoping that we're fitting in, or I don't want to look bad in front of people, or I hope no one saw me do this. And everybody's thinking the same thing. So Inside Out 2, it's a brisk 90 minutes. I thought it was great. It's charming. It's a ton of fun. It's a new crew from director Kelsey Mann to some of the writers, Meg LaFauve and Dave Holstein. Uh, I think that it definitely is a Pixar sequel. I don't think it reaches the heights of the first Inside Out, despite the fact that it maybe talks about topics that are a little more appropriate for your age if you are an adult watching this. If you're not a child who's watching this, I'm sure that you could probably relate more closely to some of what Riley has gone through or is going through now. I just don't know. I mean, the highs of, what's his name? Bing Bong from the first movie. I mean, there's emotional moments in this movie for sure, but I just don't know if they quite hit those same peaks that the first did. I'm really glad that they made the movie, because I think it continues the story in a positive direction. It tells yet again another awfully relatable tale, just in terms of how we live our life and what we want to put out there versus what we want to receive from people as well. The animation style, love Pixar. I don't know if we're just getting to a point where animation's just trying to look almost too realistic. Maybe it was just me, but like Joy, the whole time I was like, I don't know if they've over designed her character or she just looks too smooth. I don't mind cartoons looking like cartoons. They don't have to be the sleekest. When I watch some of the Miyazaki films, having that kind of hand drawn pencil, it's animation. You know that this was something that people spent time to design on. It doesn't look hyper realistic. And again, that's not a knock on the film. That didn't change my love or disdain for it or anything like that. I guess it was more just something that I noticed, where it was like, this movie looks really polished, and maybe it just didn't have that authentic Pixar first look to me, perhaps. But Inside Out doesn't need me to tell you to go see it, because they're doing numbers. And if you haven't seen it by now, take the kids, take your friends, go by yourself, cry a little bit, relate a little bit with the movie. I think a film like this is always good to kind of get us back into a younger, fresher mental state, perhaps. Animated movies are not just for kids, and obviously Pixar does not make these entirely with children in mind. So I think you're pretty safe taking anybody to this film, and everyone's going to come out taking something positive. Hopefully, maybe turning some leaves in their life as well, and realizing It's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to worry about some of these things, but I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. I've got people around me who like me for me, and that's what you focus on. And so Inside Out 2 is probably going to be at $1 billion before we know it. That'll be the first $1 billion release of 2024. So that's good for movie theaters. This is a weird year where, looking at the box office here now, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, just cleared about 168 million worldwide. It's the 12th highest grossing movie of the year. You got Inside Out and Dune, who are near the 800 million mark, and then your 12th highest grossing film just crossed 150 million. So theaters could still use the help. And so I'm just here to tell you, especially for a worthwhile film, go check it out. Go support your theaters. The movie experience deserves to live on there. Since I just mentioned Furiosa, we'll just briefly touch on it now. After spending a month in theaters, Furiosa is now available for rental and digital purchase at home. You can watch it in 4K. You can take in the glory of the Octoboss and the Bomby Knockers and this outrageous world that George Miller continues to refine and just deliver on every level. I've seen so many clips pop up on Twitter and Instagram now, just with like, holy shit, how did they do that? How do you rig this camera? Is this a real effect? Is this CGI? Where does that line kind of blend? I think George Miller just creates such exciting action that feels like something you've never seen before. And there's just so many, like, watching it on my phone. This is like the Christopher Nolan, what he hates and everything he hates. But watching this, letterboxed on my phone, I'm not even watching it in landscape. We're watching this portrait and watching some of these sequences from Furiosa. I'm like, I gotta go put this on the TV, man. I'm like, this looks awesome here because it looked incredible in the theaters. And it's still playing in some theaters, so please, yeah, I mean, if you love movies, if you just love movies, if you love going and watching something that delivers on that level of like, this is so out of this world, this is, going to take me out of my life here, put me into this impossible scenario or just this outrageous, absurd predicament, and you just take it in. And I mean, the Mad Max world already is so zany and outrageous, so inspired though by anything from Cormac McCarthy and all these post-apocalyptic wasteland type worlds. I mean, it is just so unique. The filmmaking, the style of editing, there's so many unique transitions. Furiosa is going to be one that it's frustrating. More people didn't see it in theaters. Fury Road kind of suffered from the same thing. And I know that these movies, I would say Furiosa has far more of a story than Fury Road does. But, I really enjoyed it. I've already got it on, on digital now. I'm going to watch it again. So, if you can't make it out to the theater, check out Furiosa at home. It is so worth it. If you can go to the theater, though, I'm not saying don't waste your time at home. If you've got a great TV at home, awesome. But there is, again, something to be said for having this experience in theaters and kind of looking at the people around you after something happens. Like, we all just witnessed the same. Like, that was absurd. Like, that I love. I don't know. I love those moments. I'm not that guy in the theater who's like, arms are up, like, yes. There are those guys at the theater, and, they annoy me too. But, your secret, like, little Tiger Woods to yourself, like, yes, like, this is just incredible. This is just awesome. This is why movies rule, and this is why I go to movies. This is why people love movies. So Furiosa, an absolute must see. The last film I wanted to touch on before I end this and go watch like 4 more movies to talk to you guys about is the Bikeriders. And the Bikeriders was one that was supposed to come out towards the end of last year. It was potentially going to be in some of the Oscar consideration, maybe. It boasts an incredible cast. You've got Austin Butler, you've got Jodie Comer, you've got Tom Hardy. This is a story about a group of bike riders, the Chicago Vandals, based loosely around the Chicago Outlaws Motorcycle Club. And this is based on a photo book by Danny Lyon, who spent years photographing and interviewing members of this Chicago biker crew, really before this idea of the biker gangs that you see in Sons of Anarchy and things like that. Before that really changed, this was almost like his last portrait of what motorcycles and bikers were before things turned to violence, before things turned to power. And Jeff Nichols tells this story in such a fascinating and tender way. Nichols is one who I've watched his work now for what feels like at least over a decade, from Take Shelter to Mud, Midnight Special, and Loving. A lot of his stories are a little more on the melodramatic side. They're definitely very emotionally anchored, which is something I have always really appreciated about them, because while they might not have, these large, massive movie moments, blockbuster, whatever you want to call it, you kind of come away from it with this solemn kind of feeling of just like, oh my gosh, like it was an incredible story. And it was just something fascinating to witness. It was something that, again, feels like I don't watch too many movies like this. I don't have too many experiences where I come away from a film really wanting to learn more about these people or just get a better understanding for maybe what the world was like at that time. And so what Nichols does with this film, The Bikeriders, is he kind of takes those photos, and he was kind of speaking to someone in an interview about this. What he wanted to do with the movie was take these photos, bring them to life, and allow you to kind of watch them breathe for a moment. And then they kind of fill some of the story in as well, a lot of which is kind of narrated and told by Jodie Comer's character, who is a wife to Austin Butler's character in the film. And I think that decision as well, having, this woman who is kind of telling you all about the ins and outs of this pretty much all male biker gang. I think it's a great decision because it almost feels like watching some of these gangster films too. Where all the wives, they know what's going on. They're around all this buffoonery and the guys smoking and drinking. But you know what? You can't tell your man not to ride his bike because he's going to do what he's going to do. And there's a ton in the movie that obviously touches on male ego, especially, when you're leading other men, this idea of them looking to you for power, for advice, for whatever it is. And so it comes, the story comes about in a very interesting way. Tom Hardy's character, Johnny, supposedly watching a Marlon Brando movie or show, feels like, okay, I like riding motorcycles. I've already got a group of guys. We go out, we rip up a ton of dirt, we race, we do everything. What if we made our own little biker club, a little biker gang, And again, it wasn't started with the intention of being anything, disruptive, or, we're going to go out and incite riots or cause chaos. But it was, hey, it's a fraternity like this for guys, for like-minded people who otherwise might be outcasts in their own world, and we get to come together. We talk about bikes. We get drunk. We've got our own bar. Pretty much, life's pretty good. And eventually, you've got a young guy named Benny who comes into play, and that's Austin Butler's character. And Benny is almost everything that Johnny and these guys want to be. He just doesn't give a damn about anything. You give him a dirty look, he'll swing on you. You tell him, take your colors off because I don't like you having that outlaw patch in this place. You're going to have to pry it off his dead body. And he's someone who doesn't mind getting himself hurt or getting in trouble. So, of course, when he meets Kathy, played by Jodie Comer, the two have this almost inseparable magnetic quality, but she knows what kind of life that he leads. He's not like those other biker bums, but I just got to say, her accent, this Illinois accent, there's been a lot said about it online afterwards because people are like, she's just got this wild and quirky voice. Well, kind of talking about all these things like this. And she's kind of got this little tone to her. And the people are like, there's no way people talk like that. It's like, well, if you've met people from certain parts of Illinois, and if you've listened to the actual recordings from this woman, the actual Kathy character, I mean, it was like spot on. And it feels very timely. Like, the way everybody kind of talks, you definitely feel like you're back in the 60s, and they do a great job setting the scene from the houses to the cars to the type of bikes they're racing, kind of these Illinois farmlands where they're out cruising through too. It really, everything works together to bring this feeling of being back in that time and understanding what it is to have that freedom out on the road and to try to understand what allures these guys so much about being on that bike, being together, riding out in this, 50-person posse. Um, and the most interesting part of the story kind of arises when you just see how, like with a lot of things just kind of grow. And especially if you've got a club or if you've got something people want to be a part of, it's natural that people are going to, join up, and you've got these different chapters that want to start up in different cities. And before you know it, this thing is turning too large for you to really control or for you to really have a handle on. And so watching Tom Hardy's character kind of realize that, okay, this is becoming too big for me to handle. You've got these younger guys kind of coming, and a lot of people coming back from Vietnam who obviously have been just, affected by everything that happened to them over there. And you start to see some of these values shift in what the club looks like, what we're doing together, what we have to do to show our strength. And it just really is a fascinating look at how power not only can corrupt, but if you let it slip a little bit, people take advantage, or, sometimes maybe it's okay to just have your thing. It doesn't need to be bigger. That was kind of my takeaway from this. But, you've got guys like Norman Reedus, Boyd Holbrook, Bo Knapp, Michael Shannon, who is, Jeff Nichols' muse, probably. It's just a very fascinating look at some of these guys and how they started this thing and where it all ended up. I wouldn't mind it a little bit more in the movie. Like, I think this would really make a great, interesting kind of little miniseries as well. Great actors, really fascinating story at the core, and I really liked what they were doing somewhat with the exploration of those photos and the real life guys. I think maybe if they would have leaned into that a little bit more too throughout the film, because afterwards they always give you the real photos, or hey, here's the real guy next to his other character. But in the movie, they give you moments where it's almost like we're posing for a photo, but it's the actors, and then they'll use that photo 2 hours later. But I just wonder if that maybe if a little more of that insertion would have helped some of the flow of the story. Because again, it, like a lot of Nichols films, it didn't quite have a moment that was like, oh, we're building, 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 and then oh my god, we're at the peak here, the hero's journey. It's not totally that type of movie, and that's fine. But I think maybe it just leaves a teeny bit to be desired towards the end, and the impact that it perhaps wants to leave you with. But again, a fascinating story. Definitely one that made me go back and try to look at some of these photos as well in this artwork. And you look at how well they captured that period of time, and just kind of that feeling in America too, maybe before things totally changed. So that ought to do it for our movie reviews for now. I think on the docket for this week, I mean, it's just getting crazy. We've got Horizon, Kevin Costner's partially self-funded film that lost him his house, his wife. Yellowstone, the end of that season. But if you've watched Dancing with Wolves, if you are a Kevin Costner believer like I am, this thing should be pretty good. So I am very much looking forward to that. I know A Quiet Place 2 is on the horizon as well, or not A Quiet Place 3. I think I need to watch A Quiet Place 2, actually. Not that it influences the prequel to the series. But much like Bad Boys, I was like, I gotta watch 3 before I watch 4, I guess. We've also got The Watchers, which is also, I believe, out now on VOD and rental. Dakota Fanning, that's certainly in that kind of creepy horror realm, something I might want to check out. Obviously, we'll watch that with the lights on. I'm still kind of catching up on The Acolyte after watching the first 4 episodes early. I need to catch up on this 5th one. There's been so much discussion about how it's ruining Star Wars. And it seems like a lot of the people who are saying the show is ruining Star Wars aren't actually watching the show. And this is like classic internet stuff. Because again, there's tons of discussion around Superman right now because they're filming in downtown Cleveland. Tons of set photos are coming out now. We've seen the suit. We've seen Lois Lane. We've seen all kinds of stuff. Clark Kent rocking the perm curled style teenage boy haircut right now with his alter ego. Internet discussion, especially as it relates to movies and comic book properties, is always It's always interesting. And I'm not saying I don't partake. I'm not saying I haven't had my own opinions on some of these things. But for Star Wars, I'll just say, if you watch the movies, if you only watch the movies, I'm sure none of these shows make sense because a lot of people can use the Force. A lot of people have this ability to tap into magic within this world. And so a lot of people are being pretty reductive. They're like, oh, lesbian witches created two Force users. Anakin's story is just obliterated, and Kai Eddie Mundi's birth date was actually something else in canon. And it's just like sometimes you just got to let things be. Or, the fact that they wrote 30 Star Wars novelizations and they won't tie up to the movies, it just is what it is. But every Star Wars movie or show adds something that contradicts everything from the original movies. And that's the hardest thing I feel like about what is going on in the Star Wars world is they're like having to be so meticulous about like, well, this happens in 185 AD adjacent to the Clone Wars on Yavin 4. And it just, I was having this discussion with a few friends about comic books and comic book movies and this feeling of we need to have everything interlinked. Everything must be a connected tissue between movies, TV, video games. We can't make a Marvel movie without having a billion other characters impacted by what's going on. And I think we're just reaching a level across all boards where it's like, I just give me the content. I want a Batman movie and I don't need it to be tied to four other universes, or I don't need you to slow production down because you want to introduce another Batman first. Matt Reeves, the Batman, won't come out. Batman Part 2 won't come out till 2026 at the earliest now. And we're going to have another new Batman introduced for the DCU by then. And it just, Marvel is about to introduce the X-Men and Fantastic Four. And there's a part of you like, well, a lot of the X-Men movies were pretty solid when you didn't have the MCU overlords kind of pulling the strings. And so I can't help but feel that maybe if you just let directors and people do their own things, you bankroll the properties you think are going to make money. Obviously, Batman will make you money. The X-Men have been pretty bankable. Spider-Man is endlessly bankable. Superman remains to be seen, and he's always kind of an iffy. How about my girl Wonder Woman right here? They don't plan to put her back in a movie or show for years. And it's just like, not only are you leaving money on the table, but you've got beloved characters who fans all over the world are looking forward to seeing. And now we're all just getting shafted because the higher ups are playing, all right, well, you know what? We'll give you this if you give us that. Or like, yeah, we'll slow roll this one because we want to bring Plastic Man and Kite Man into the threshold and into the eyes of the public. And, we just don't. I'm not saying we don't need Plastic Man, but he's not a priority. That's just me. These are just my musings. I'm always curious to hear what you may think about the constant state of the film and the comic book world we live in. So feel free to let me know. Feel free to comment. I always appreciate the interaction, and as always, I appreciate y'all tuning in and listen to my musings here as well. You can find all of our content at nicktiffany.com, NT Movie Reviews on all your social media networks, podcast platforms, and on YouTube. So thank you again for tuning in if you joined us live this time. Thank you again for trying out this new style of episode as well for me. And have a great day. We'll catch you next time.